First of all, hello Mr Winnick, and thank you for joining us here at Walsall College Radio.
I'm pleased to be here in this excellent new building, which I have been on a few occasions, but I'm certainly, like everyone else, very impressed indeed by the building, and I'm sure the facilities are excellent, and I hope all the students do very well indeed.
Thank you. First of all, you have been in politics almost all of your adult life. Was it always your desire to be a Member of Parliament, and what was the main catalyst that got you into politics?
What would be true to say is not that I, from birth, so to speak, wanted to be a Member of Parliament, but from a pretty early age, certainly not from birth, in my teenage years, I was very interested in politics, but radical politics, and to some extent, I suppose that hasn't changed. Some may say it's a bit less radical than when I was in my teens, but the whole purpose of being in politics and in the House of Commons, as I see it as a Labour MP, is to try and advance the interest of working people.
Thank you. And for people who know very little of politics or do not take interest, could you briefly describe your main duties as MP for Walsall North and, of course, your policies?
Yeah, I'll be brief. I mean, first and foremost, the job of a Member of Parliament is to be in the House of Commons when it's sitting, to criticise or support the government of the day, depending whether your government's in office, whether your party's in office, though I may say that on a number of occasions during the 13 years Labour was in office, and I was very, very pleased it was so. I was critical on a number of issues and made my views known. But obviously with this Tory-led government, I'm even more critical. Combined with that is my constituency duties. I have surgeries, 4 surgeries every month. The number of emails I receive, you can imagine, are many from constituents. I respond to them, write to ministers, write to the local authority, and do whatever I can to assist constituents.
Quite a few of the younger generation, for example students at this college, choose not to vote for a number of reasons. What would your message be to try to encourage them to vote?
We live in a democracy. I mean, in Egypt, the joke is they've been waiting 5,000 years in order to be able to vote, because up to now, they knew whoever they voted for, it really made no difference. The decision was made well beforehand. I remember when apartheid ended in South Africa, when that tyranny ended, and the first democratic elections in which everyone could vote, every adult, men and women, regardless, of course, of colour, they queued up for hours in 1994. You know, we haven't always had a democracy in Britain. It didn't just come from the sky. People had to fight for the right to vote and make sure that ordinary people without property, could vote. As far as women are concerned, just imagine, 100 years ago, women were demonstrating on the streets, going on hunger strike. Why? For the right to vote, no more, for the right to vote. They were denied the right to vote simply because of their gender. And earlier on, men without property also didn't have the right to vote. If you believe in the rule of law, if you believe you should be able to express your point of view without the secret police knocking on your door, terrorising you, your children, taking you to a concentration camp, look what happened in the 20th century. Hitler, Stalin, Mao, and all the rest of it. This is a democracy, and it can only be sustained if enough people take part in the voting process.
What would you say your greatest achievement of your political career? I know you've been involved in Northern Ireland as British co-chair to the British-Irish Interparliamentary Body, and also strongly opposed to fox hunting, 2 very different but nonetheless noble causes.
Well, you're well brief. I would say that one of my achievements is to be part of a process that said nearly half a century ago that if we have people here, the blacks and Asians were always in very, very small numbers in Britain, but if we were to have a multiracial country, which we have, racial discrimination must be outlawed. And in the 60s, I was very much part of a process in Parliament for another constituency that supported every move, and I tried to get the government of the day successfully, with others, certainly not on my own, to outlaw discrimination, which to a large extent we succeeded in doing. But it could be said that when the Labour government was in office, the only time Tony Blair as Prime Minister was defeated was as a result of my amendment, which was over pre-charge detention. The government advocated 90 days. I said that was far too excessive, and my amendment of 28 days was carried in November 2005. Fox hunting, certainly, and I won't go into Northern Ireland, but I certainly have a strong interest in the peace process.
As a strong supporter of human rights, you supported the invasion of Iraq in 2003, and a great threat was neutralised in the capture of Saddam Hussein. In hindsight, would you still have supported that?
I would have not supported the armed intervention or the invasion of Iraq if one knew he didn't have weapons of mass destruction. He didn't, but bear this point in mind. He did have and used them against the Kurds in 1988. He was a murderous despot. He initiated a war against the Iranian regime, which took the lives on both sides in the 1980s of 1 million, mainly young people under the age of 25, more or less to some extent the sort of age group in this college. That in itself was not a justification and couldn't be the international law for the invasion. And on reflection, more should have been done to verify whether in fact he had weapons of mass destruction. But what I don't accept is that the invasion is responsible for the massacre of so many thousands and tens of thousands of people that was carried out by the terrorists and continued to be the case.
Thank you. This summer we have a number of key events. For example, the Jubilee is fast approaching, and of course after that we have the Summer Olympic Games, held in London for the first time since 1948. What benefits do you think that these events will have upon the economy?
Well, more people will come to Britain. I hope this Tory government is not going to make it that much more difficult for genuine people to come over here. And of course, in the main, it's millions of people over a period of time who visit our country, in the main impressed, despite the rain, which is not happening during the course of this interview, I'm glad to say. And as far as, well, I think we're very pleased to have the Olympics, but it's not just London, of course. It will have an effect on other parts of the country, including this borough, and certainly many people from this borough will be watching the Olympics in person and not just on the screen. And as for the Jubilee, well, the Queen, I'm old enough to remember when she went on the throne. She's a very popular monarch, and it's understandable there'll be a lot of enthusiasm for the Jubilee.
The strongest economy within Europe is Germany, which grew by 3.6%, who have maintained their wealth throughout the continuation of their dynamic industries, which Britain seems to have neglected and lost out to overseas opponents. What can Britain do to catch up with their European neighbours?
Well, I want to, I suppose, be somewhat party political here. I take the view of what the government is doing is cutting far too deeply. Yes, the deficit has to be tackled. Obviously, it's got to be tackled. But the recession and the double dip recession, which is happening at the moment, undoubtedly is not going to lead by any means to growth. In this borough, we have increasing unemployment, except at the last count. I had a debate only last year on youth unemployment in my constituency, Walsall, which is amongst the highest in the country. The fact of the matter is that the government needs to take a different approach. Otherwise, this recession could just continue to such an extent that unemployment will be far worse than it is at the moment, and it's bad enough at the moment. Whether Mr Cameron and Mr Osborne will listen to their critics remains another matter.
That leads me to my next question. Can you identify any policy or schemes that will even out the current decline in employment?
Well, one certainly is housing. I would like to see a vast extension of social housing, private housing, yes. We've had a good deal of private housing over the years, but you see, a good number of my constituents are simply not in a position to take a mortgage and to sustain a mortgage. They wouldn't get a mortgage in the first place. And so many write to me, understandably so, asking if I can assist over rehousing. Well, obviously, I can only write to the organisation, also a housing group, who have a very, very long waiting list. And my view is that But as a result of house building, the accessories, the furniture which is necessary, and all the other work which is involved in house building can generate employment. And that's one way in which this government, in my view, could pursue a course that could lessen unemployment.
The government have started to measure people's psychological and environmental well-being, also known as the happiness index. Considering it's a $2 million a year project, do you believe the money could have been spent better off elsewhere? What are your views on the subject?
Undoubtedly. I'll tell you what will make people happy. What makes anyone happy, every normal person, to be able to work, to have a reasonable income, if you have a family, to be able to support your children and your partner, if your partner is unable to work or whatever. That's the way to make people happy. Not being on the dole, not being in a situation, say, if you're in the youth group up to 25, simply unable to find work, or if you're in your 40s or 50s being made redundant and fearing that you may never be able to work again because of your age. That's the way to tackle unhappiness, allowing people what we all want to do, to be able to work and have a reasonable income and have some form of security in their lives.
Thank you for your time, Mr. Winnick. It's been a pleasure. And do you have a final message for Walsall College Radio?
Well, I'm delighted to be here. I hope the students are finding it very useful. I wish them every possible success. Let me again, what may be taken as a party point, I was very much opposed to the abolition of the education maintenance grant. It gave help to those staying on at school beyond 16. I believe the Tory-led government was wrong in removing it, and we shall continue, certainly on the Labour benches, to pursue that in various ways. But again, many thanks for the opportunity of being here and giving my views today.
Thanks again.